The gods are just, but beloved Baelor taught us they can also be merciful. What is to be done with this traitor, Your Grace?
My mother wishes me to let Lord Eddard join the Night's Watch. Stripped of all titles and powers, he would serve the realm in permanent exile. And my lady Sansa has begged mercy for her father. But they've the soft hearts of women. So long as I am your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head.
Oh my gosh, Mark, that was insane. Do you remember your feelings, what it felt like the first time you saw Game of Thrones, or if you read the book, when Ned Stark went out?
Yeah, I read the book back when it first was released. And I remember like sitting down to watch a show with my wife who she never read the book. And I told her, like, don't fall in love with any of these characters.
Yeah.
and I told her that multiple times throughout the series. And she was like just raging when they cut his head off. Spoiler alert.
I feel like that one's pretty much out of the bag at this point.
Yeah, it was shocking. It just felt like, even watching it, and I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I was like, God, this is the main character.
What are you guys doing?
What is happening? So good. But what a villain.
That was precisely the moment, if you listen carefully, you can hear George R.R. Martin cashing his check.
Yeah, and you can also hear the boiling hatred in everybody for that little snot Joffrey.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm glad he's grown up and gone on to a better life, the actor Jack Gleason.
Yeah.
But I will not miss Joffrey for a moment.
I'll tell you what, guys, we're going to be talking about death here today in this Halloween episode.
Yeah, we're going to drop this one, I think, on the 28th or so, just short of our ghoulish holiday. And today's subject is death.
Death. So, Ben, why does death matter, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, so death matters because it adds a lot of really interesting stakes to your game. It's narratively useful, just as we saw in Game of Thrones. Maybe a lesson from Game of Thrones is maybe you can overdo it too.
But, a little bit.
But the thing is, we're going to kind of explore ways to do this right, because frankly, it's one of these things that when you're running games, you're kind of afraid of this, right? Because if characters die, typically that means that they're failing. And that means that they are probably going to be unhappy. They're going to be certainly disengaged from the game at that point. If you kill them 2 hours into a 4-hour session, they're going to be sitting around and thinking about that death for a while.
Yeah, we're talking about killing their characters, guys. Killing their characters.
Right. Do not kill your players. That's how you disband a group very quickly. Other things are probably going to happen to you too.
Yeah. Not all games, though, right, Phil, would be appropriate for this, right?
That's right. In a certain sense, what death is in a lot of games is it's a way of indicating a low point or a failure that the characters have had. And what failure looks like in different games is going to have some variety according to like the different kind of setting that it's in. So, for example, in comedic games, death probably should be funny. It should be treated lightheartedly. We were talking a little bit ago about
serious games. Death can be funny too.
Well, yeah. But there are games out there that have this kind of mechanic built into them. I'm thinking about a game called Paranoia, which was, it's a comedic, lighthearted game. In that game, you play a clone, and on your character sheet, you have like 10 boxes because you can be 10 clones of the same character basically before the game is done. And so like when you die in that game, you just check a box off. And that's it. Your character sheet, your GM brings you back in somewhere. Your character
Yeah.
sheet's the same. It's not a big deal. Or like in superhero games, failure in a superhero game is not about like, did my character die? Or beating your enemy isn't about, did I kill the character? He's going off to jail or he's unconscious. That's enough.
Unless you're the Punisher.
Yeah. Yeah. Today, though, we're going to really focus and talk about death, and especially in the kind of fantasy RPGs we play a lot, certainly in horror RPGs.
We want to raise the stakes here, guys, and that's what death does. It raises the stakes and that emotional investment players have in the game, knowing that death is on the line.
That's the ultimate risk in a certain sense. What does it do for our stories here?
It just elevates everything. Like, it brings everything up. Like, you think about some of the great deaths in film or books, it's always been like the hero's journey. It takes that hero to the next level. It should drive them into a new direction. And if handled poorly, it doesn't do that. Like, that hero can't make that next step if it's handled poorly. And we want you, the listener, to avoid those missteps.
When you say taking the next step, you must mean somebody else is dying, not the hero in question who's taking that next step.
Yeah, no, of course not. The people around you, keep in mind, this is a game. We're all playing together. We got a campaign. You got multiple characters. Every other person at that table should be able to take a big step up from that point on their character growth. They should be bonded. They should be bonded over this death. It should be a rallying point, could be a rallying cry.
This could potentially be something that's really fraught for your players. So one of the important things to do is to try to handle it right and handle it with, some care. Let's say something else too is, Mark, what happens in a game that doesn't ever have death?
I don't know how I could feel excited on those dice. What's the point of the dice if failure is not an option? So I feel like success and failure, that's why dice exist in this game. And without that, what's the point of the dice? But keep in mind, guys, death is not the end. It's a story beat. So keep that in mind, that we don't need to think of death as like the story is over. It's just beginning.
And there's a lot of things you can do as GMs to change the way that death is felt, to enhance it and so forth. So Mark, let's talk about different types of death and how it is that you're going to, as a GM, handle that in the game. So, give me some taxonomy here. What are some different types of death?
So we've broken a few of these down. I'll go ahead and discuss like that first one. Maybe you want to touch on the next. I'm going to talk about heroic sacrifice. When we think about heroic sacrifice, we think of that kind of that person stepping forward when everybody else steps back. Somebody's going to hold that line. They could be very like kind of romantic, noble exits. I think about Boromir from Lord of the Rings, who was a flawed character. Let's face it. He was a person who had given in to the temptation of the ring and what that power could do for his people. And it was noble that he wanted to do that. But the ring doesn't care about nobleness. And thus, he had to make a sacrifice. And in his death, he realized his folly. And it was such a beautiful part of the book, beautiful part of the film, when he fights to defend the exodus of the hobbits.
Yeah, I mean, same movie, really, right? Gandalf's sacrifice on the bridge at Khazad-dûm. Talk about going out like a champ. Yeah, none shall pass. But I think Boromir's was so kind of poetic, and he got that moment where he could talk to Aragorn and call him his king. Yeah. Wow. Well, okay, this is interestingly a kind of death that the character is choosing in the moment, but that's not the only kind that we get. Sometimes I've just critted this character with a giant by accident. In stories, this happens by accident too. I'm thinking here, for example, of Wash from Firefly.
Yeah.
The ship makes a crash landing. Serenity is down. We got Reavers on the way. Oh gosh, we've got to get up. We've got to get out of the crash. And all of a sudden, chunk, Wash is done. And you're like, did I just see what I just saw? I didn't. Is that for, oh my gosh.
It's shocking. Yeah, that's part of this type of exit. It's to be shocking. And Sometimes it's like a slap in the face or somebody throwing cold water on you. It's to wake you up. It's to wake you up to the stakes are real, guys.
Now, when that happens in a game and it's unexpected like that, because the dice have decided that that guy's going to die today, what do you do?
You got to respect the dice. I mean, I'm sorry, but like, again, we're here to play. The dice are the arbiter. We respect the dice. They're equal part storyteller. We go back to some of our very first podcasts where we talk about dice having an equal say in the story.
That was one of our 3 pillars in the very first podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. And the dice, again, don't care about your story. It doesn't care about your backstory. Doesn't care about your hopes and dreams.
Where your character's intentions were.
It just cares about 1s and 20s.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too, is a lot of this, I think, also is going to be about the way you're setting a tone in the game.
Yeah.
So there's people who really think of this as kind of collaborative storytelling. And if we don't want somebody to die, they don't have to die. And whether you're taking kind of a narrative angle on it like that, or whether you're taking kind of like a, hey, look, if you break the integrity of the game, this is kind of your point, the dice have to have their say. I think in either of those cases, that thing we said earlier about like, if you avoid death, you're going to lose the stakes of this thing. And so in a narrative where nobody ever dies, or in a game where when the dice kill somebody and then you kind of walk it back somehow by breaking the rules or by changing something, there's a real danger that you're going to, frankly, undermine the value of the game in a certain way. So I'd say,
you had mentioned something just a moment ago about how sometimes we have to unpack these things after the event.
Yeah.
And I think you're spot on with this, in that oftentimes these tragic accidents, that's what we're going to call these, you do have to think about them after. And sometimes we attach an importance to it after the fact. But at the time, you're kind of like, we got to get out of this. It's all hell's breaking loose. And I think you even saw that in the movie Serenity.
People spent time after that thinking about that and thinking about what that meant and what that meant for the kind of story that they were in. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of sense making that you've got to do after the fact can be a really interesting thing for players to do as well.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing the post-mortem on that, literally, where, it's like, should the party have gone into that next room? Should we have flipped that switch? Whatever their choices were that led them up to that moment, the party's going to think a lot about that.
Let's go to our third part. We're going to talk about narrative consequences. I think we opened this episode with Ned Stark, getting his head lopped off there. That is an example of narrative consequence. Ned made a choice. And I think at that point when he made that choice, he knew what the consequences could be. Sometimes at a game, a player might make a choice. And when they make that choice, they might know what the end result consequence could be. And if they're okay with that, sometimes these things will come to fruition. Obviously, Ned failed in his rebellion, or what he was trying to do, and this is the consequence.
So in a certain sense, you're saying that's death as a choice the players might make.
Yeah, but it's also kind of story-driven. It's a story-driven death. It's oftentimes a GM might present the players with, you can do this, but if you fail, there are consequences to this failure. And sometimes, let's face it, you can't fight off all the events in the story. Like if you have a king who's got the guard at his disposal and you're like a level 2 or 3 peon, what are you going to do? At some point, you have to kind of like acquiesce to the story and understand that these things are bigger than you. And this is going to happen. And this is a thing where we'll discuss about how to handle that. This is a tricky one.
And there's also a way in which this can be something that players ask for too. And I don't know that it happens very often, but one of the things that players sometimes do is they'll say, you know what, I've been playing this, take your pick, rogue or druid or whatever I've been playing for a while. Mechanic, if we're doing a space game, maybe a pilot, something, whatever it might be. And they're going to say, I'm not really resonating with this. I'm not having fun with this. And so what I'd like to do is like to change characters. Maybe what we could do is I'd like to kill this guy off in a way that's really interesting. Sometimes there's a real narrative benefit enhancing your story and helping the other characters build their stories. And when players do request to change characters, that may be something that you can use to effect, and you can work with the player to get that done. And that's the thing I'd say is, like, whatever else you do with all these different kinds of deaths we're talking about, don't miss the opportunity, if there's going to be a death, to enhance that story and to bring your characters forward and give them a chance to operate with that. Now, Mark, when we're getting ready to do that, when we want to then introduce a death into this game, what can we do to prepare for that?
Prepare for the afterlife. I would say let's start with get expectations set with your players pretty early. When you establish your game, let them know what's on the line.
So in a certain sense, you don't want a character to die in this game and the player looks at you and goes, I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah. But also, you want to look at players who maybe you look at their backstories. You might have some tragic backstories, or you might have some indication that a player might be looking for a tragic exit in some sense.
Or at least that they're very risky and that they see that as realistic for their character. These are the things you're calling death flags.
Yeah. Or maybe a person who takes a lot of risky behavior and kind of take mental note of that behavior or those flags. That's maybe where you could build something around. And then talk with your player beforehand if appropriate. Your player might even approach you stating hey, I'm going to be going off to school and I'm going to have to lead the campaign come March. Could I have I'd like to have my character have some sort of good exit, a good, death exit or something like that. And you could have that discussion with him and you could say, hey, what do you want? What would be your ideal? How do you see your character leaving this story?
What's cool about that is that then you've got a kind of collaborator in the story beats that lead up to that moment.
Yeah.
And it's really fun if you're doing that. We've said we don't want to surprise our players, but we don't mind surprising the ones who aren't dying. That can be part of the punch of this thing is when people go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. You
want them to be a little bit in control of their legacy and how they want their character to be remembered by the party. And that's an important thing. If somebody is leaving or move town and they want to leave in that fashion, what a great way to kind of send them off in, and it could really boon for the rest of the group and everybody could enjoy. It sounds weird to say enjoying their character death, but we all love story beats. We all love good story.
We all then think back to those things where that was a meaningful thing too. Do you remember 100%. When my character did this or that, and that was what saved the whole party? Or do you remember when my character did this and that, and then that made the big bad who'd been ruling for 1,000 years vulnerable, right? The opposite of this is, surprise, your character's dead.
Yeah.
I've been planning this for weeks. And then the player's like, wait, I'm sorry, you what now? For real?
And we talked about surprise death up above, the tragic accident, and those will happen, folks. And they're unfortunate sometimes. Sometimes they're fortunate. I don't know how you look at it. But we want to avoid that if possible.
To the extent that we can give players agency in the way as their characters exit, they're going to own that and be much happier with that than they would have been if we had just kind of sprung it on them.
Yeah, that surprise death, we have to unpack it afterwards. We're kind of unpacking this beforehand.
Right.
But we'd like to do.
Yeah, with that player. Well, and then when this happens, then part of what this is doing is, as we've said, you can use this to enhance the narrative. You can use it to enhance the way that the story's going. So, Mark, what are some things that you can do to really give the game time to reflect on the character's death?
I mean, you could have memorials. How do these characters react to the demise? Do we have a funeral send off? You could have maybe some of their legacy items, and there's always the classic, the players are all chomping at the bit to pick over the corpse of their ally to get their magic item, their magic sword.
That's so bad, guys. I know that he just fell in combat, but has anybody spoken for that longsword there?
Yeah, loot that body. Now, let's hold off on looting that body. We'll get to that. You guys will get to that. Don't worry about it. These items could be handed down in a way as part of a legacy item, and it means a lot to be holding the sword of, your fallen comrade.
I like this point about NPC reactions, though, too, that, maybe the character did something heroic and there's this great legend that sprang up around them and everybody knows this story. I also like the idea that there could also be a lot of rumors about how the character died and not all of them are flattering. You know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, I heard, he backed into the wrong, monster and he went out that way. Oh, I heard that he went
out like Boba Fett. What a sucker.
there's all kinds of ways you can handle that. The trick is to make it memorable and make it something that the players, later talk about and think about in ultimately positive terms.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just adding to the story. We're adding things on top of it. So we're going to talk about some of the techniques we can use to make these things happen.
We were just talking a moment ago about like how there's these moments to reflect on that after the fact. If you get this right, what's going to happen is that a character's death is going to essentially bond the party a little bit more. It's going to give the world a chance to change a little bit. You can help people reset the story in certain ways. Maybe the character's death created a vulnerability for the big bad, or maybe the character's death opened an escape route that otherwise would have killed the whole party, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, the narrative changes, the party gets closer together if you get this right, and ultimately then it feels like the spirit of that character lingers. It may be also that even in a game where death occurs, you might have players that are very technical about it. And if they don't want to dwell on it, that's okay too. The bottom line with everything is listen to your players and find the right beats for your story. The thing we're really trying to address here, though, is you're going to have this happen in your games, and there are going to be players who are ready to be sore about it because they had a lot invested emotionally in that character. So in order to make them feel like it's okay to release that, you've got to give them something. And this is kind of what you're paying.
So let's talk about some tools and techniques that we can use to pull some of this stuff off. And I'm going to start with like building that tension before the moment. If you know you got a player who's going to be exiting, you want to give some signs early on so the other players aren't completely flat-footed. When it happens, it needs to feel a little bit more natural, if in fact this is an actual dramatic exit. So start building those little seeds of the storyline to fit that narrative early.
One of the things you've got here as a note, which I think is really cool, and you've seen this in games, is like a kind of a timer. There's a lot of ways to create clocks or other things that are marking the passage of time. The fuse on that bomb is going to go off in 4 rounds. The ship is falling to Earth and it will crash in 6 rounds. Like there's all kinds of things you can do to set a clock on it.
And that's a literal timer. I'm also talking about a figurative timer, like planting those seeds. You want them to follow that thread and know that their life is potentially on a timer in some fashion. But you're right. A literal timer is also incredibly exciting.
A big sense of urgency, a lot of tension. And at key moments there, they may realize that their number is up. You've got an interesting technique here when you talk about flashbacks. Tell me about how you're using flashbacks. Is this something you're going to do right at the moment somebody dies, or later, or earlier, or what?
Not necessarily like a literal flashback. You want them, before they pass, you want the players to know their history. They want their full story to be kind of unveiled at this point. So if you could have moments where you could touch a little bit on that character so that when they do pass, that is fresh in mind, the past life they've led.
Yeah, when you're watching a TV show or a movie, oftentimes there's some story beat like right before the next scene where the character dies where everybody's getting along great. Somebody says something really nice to the other person they've been arguing with all season. Yeah. And then you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then you realize, oh no, that means one of you is about to die.
Yeah. It's like the guy in the war movie break a picture of his girlfriend back home.
Yeah. Has that little monologue. I'm going to go home to my sweetheart.
Yeah. Right. Put your helmet back on, bud. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the spiritual lore of your game and how we talk about mythological framing and how we're going to tie that death into the kind of framework of this campaign. Now, I'm not sure what kind of games people run. It could be a science fiction game. So it may not be like a spiritual lore. It could also be like, this is how, if you're playing in a space military game, how does that space military handle death? Do they kind of wrap them up in a ship and shoot them out the torpedo bay? What does that ceremony look like?
It's so funny you say that because I was just thinking about how in Star Trek 2, right? We get Spock's death, but then in Star Trek 3, we get his resurrection. Spoilers, because there's some sort of mystic Vulcan telepathy, right? I was going to say, don't shortchange any genre. They've all got their ways that this might happen, I think, in certain ways.
And that's the spirituality of death. And you don't want to miss that opportunity to inform your players about the lore involving death in your realm, or this society, or this culture, or this family. It could even get micro. Make sure you're not missing that opportunity. So what comes after death, Ben?
There are so many things you can do at this point, even with the same characters, right? We've talked a lot about kind of the emotional and narrative unpacking of this, but in a lot of kind of games, it might be that there's a reincarnation thing you could do. It might be that there's ways to bring that character back from the dead. Maybe there's a new character who is related to that character in some way. You know, oh, this is my brother. Oh, that's my son. There's some different things you could do there. You can also, I've seen games that actually started with the whole party getting killed because the whole campaign was going to be in the afterlife. There's some great opportunities there. I think one of the games we did where we went through the halls of the afterlife and we kind of visited everybody's own personal, I guess, afterlife hall of judgment was really interesting. Gave the players a chance to describe their characters more and understand them better. And we had a great time moving through that one.
Resurrection could be something, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, a pretty common thing. However, if you are going to go that route, think about it. We had a character and somebody wanted to do a resurrection, and he was like, no, my character's dead. He died, great, let my character lay down. But think also about the lasting consequences and kind of the emotional fallout, both for the characters and sometimes for the players. They could also be, in some odd way, they could be mourning the loss of this character. I mean, we all get invested in books, right? Don't tell me you haven't cried when a character died in a book. You know, we do get attached to these, and even more so sometimes in the game.
Yeah, definitely true. I have been in a game where we had a character die and it really broke up one of the other players. And I think, this was a testament to the fact they'd been playing together a long time, and it was a kind of a narratively appropriate moment. We handled it with the right level of solemnity. But that was a first for me. So guys, in the end, remember that in any great story, death is never just an ending. It's always a transformation. It's a transformation of your story. It's a transformation of your party. And it may be a transformation of that character who's died into something else.
Yeah. So handled with proper intention, character death can become very memorable and meaningful for your party. So just take advantage of that opportunity if it comes. And this would be a really big part of your GMing arsenal.
Mark, I think that puts a nail in the coffin of our discussion of death, and it's time for us to move on to something else.
All right, folks, we went a little bit long today. Talking about death, we'll do that, right, won't it, Ben?
It should not be treated lightly or quickly.
In that, we just don't have a tune-up for you. We don't have time for it. So we're going to get a tune-up for next week. Have fun out there and keep those dice rolling.
To